All right, well, sit back and relax. Didn't always want to teach community college. Nobody aspires, right? When you grow up, what are you going to be? Well, I'm going to be a community college teacher. I wanted to work with monkeys.
You're kidding.
Same thing.
Huh?
Same thing.
I wanted to work with monkeys, but I don't have a degree in any sort of animal, whatever. I just thought it'd be really cool. This is a while ago, and so as I found out, UC Davis had an opening for somebody who would work with the monkeys. Now, you wouldn't be a researcher and stuff, but you got to take care of them and work with them and stuff. So I applied and I made it up to the interview process somehow, but I could tell that they weren't real excited about me, but they, were nice enough to, continue the interview. And they were explaining to me that, of course, you have to communicate with the monkeys in some way, so you have to be very creative about this. And, can you give us some examples? Can you be creative in communicating with the monkeys? And I said, well, I can, because, in fact, I am quite adept at drawing. And they said, oh, really? So how, in fact, could you convey, like, the number 3 without just doing this? We want to see some creativity. And I said, well, that's not real hard. I said I could... I could just something like this. They had a little whiteboard like this, and I was allowed to draw and stuff on it with the color crayons and stuff. And I said, well, there you go. A monkey would get that. And they said, no, what is that? I said, well, everybody can tell that that's tree. That's tree. I could tell I was not making points, but I'm committed to it now. And so they said, okay, well, if we can then what exactly, can you do 9? And I said, well, that's of course not much harder, because you just do it like this. And everybody knows that 3 plus tree plus tree, of course, is 9. All right. There was one lady, I remember her, she was kind of, there's a panel, and she's over there on the end, and she just kind of looked up and she said, okay, how about 33?
Oh.
No, I'm sorry, it's 99. How about 99? Well, first of all, I couldn't do math well enough to figure out how many trees it would make to be 99. So I was kind of stuck. And so I said, well, I just kind of go like this, like that. And I said, well, there you go. There's 99, ma'am. She said, well, how in the world is that 99? I said, well, everybody knows that 33 plus 33 plus 33, of course, is 99. Well, they're kind of on to me at this point that, as long as it's things of 3. So it was the same lady, and she was not amused, and she did not laugh. And she said, then make it an even 100. I can do that with my great drawing skills. Of course, I'm having a hard time on this, but, a little. There. Bam, 100. Of course, I'm on the board writing it. Bam, 100. And she said, what? Please explain. I says, well, here we go. This little doggy right here came along and he did his business. And everybody knows that dirty tree and a turd plus dirty tree and a turd plus dirty tree and a turd is 100. Yes! I did not get that job, but I was shortly called thereafter to teach you guys. So there we have it, dirty tree and a turd. That is how I got this dress. What's that?
I love that you got that recording.
Right?
Don't edit it out.
Don't tell anybody that. All right, types of oil. So, hey, one of the things that I want you to do, and a lot of you have your engines already together, and so if you remind me when we come back on Tuesday, we're going to get some. We'll get some cases and stuff out of the storeroom. I'm going to bring them out and send them on the tables because you'll notice that one of your projects is to go through the whole oil system. And you need to start getting used to this because once we get into the next class, you're going to be doing this with fuel through every passage. And so it's a great thing you guys can do with Larry on Saturday because just a good thing to do. And you're going to show him or me or Kelly or whoever the oil coming up, how it comes through everything, where it's getting its oil from, what all the holes are for, because there's some weird holes in the back of the accessory case. Some of you pointed out, hey, what are these holes for? And I think it was MJ's group. I didn't say, but what are those weird holes for? How does everything get lubricated? So we got a lot of things that are going to get lubricated. So we can start with, we know how the crankshaft gets lubricated, right? Which is from pressure. How does the camshaft journals get lubricated?
Pressure.
How do the lobes to tappets get lubricated? Not on the 290. Splash. Splash, and the splash comes off of the crankshaft. Okay, so that's most of the bottom end. We go to the back end. We've got gears running around in there. Are they going to run dry?
No.
So how are they getting lubricated? Well, how is the idler gear on shaft getting lubricated? There's pressure in there. Where does that pressure come from? No, eventually that's from the oil pump, of course. It comes from the oil pump. But how did it get there? How did it get there? And that's the way I do stuff. And you go, well, and then it comes right here. No, where did it get from there? So you got to have the whole plan. So that's pressure. Then that pressure turns into splash. All right, look, top end. Where's the rocker arms? Where are they going to get their oil?
Oil running down the push rod tube.
Where the oil running down the push rod tubes come from? Let's back all the way up. Tappets. How are your tappets lubricated? Tappets going in and out of that hole. Splash from what?
From crankshaft.
Well, that's inside of a journal.
Yes.
The tappet's inside that journal. Well, how's that splash going to get down in there?
I don't know. You're going to teach us.
I want you to think about it. Go back to this light combing drawing. Get rid of all the scribbles I've got here. All right, so if you can see this, push rods, tappets, left bank. So right here, here's the tappets in the left bank, and here's the tappets in the right bank. How are these getting oiled? Pressure off of the, they call it oil header, I call it a gallery. Right off that. Do you have right and left oil galleries?
No.
No, just one.
Well, there's a problem.
Yeah.
So how is the other side getting one? We'll just
The
talk about
little
the other.
tappets are getting splashed on by the crank.
Not the tappet face. The tappet face,
There's like holes on the crankcase
there's holes on the crankcase.
that goes inside.
The little slit.
Yeah, the little slit, which also oils the tappets.
Yeah, nice job. We shall call it trough technology. So your case is kind of built like this. This is the inside. And there's a trough with, and here's the tappet bores. We'll put them right here like this. Tappet bores, make the case kind of thicker. Well, and then there's a little hole drilled right like that. And so the oil, which will be this color, is flung around, splashes, gets caught in this little trough that has been built into the inside of your case, and drips down here and drips onto the tappet. It's just drip oil.
I remember. Now that you say that, I remember.
Yep, so here's the tappet face. And then that drip oil lubricates this, and that allows it to get to the push rod tube, actually the tube, and it follows the push rod tube all the way down and drips onto the rocker arms, rocker shafts, and finds its way back to the case through the oil drain back tubes. So you should be able to find all that and point it out. Especially since I just told you. Oops. All right, so where are we now? Let's see. We did types of delivery system. Janet, you were just a little bit ahead of your time there.
Sorry.
Because she asked me this question just a minute ago. Different oil systems. you have what is called a wet sump engine on your 290, which is to say all the oil is held in the sump or oil pan, which we don't call it that, we call it oil sump, right there on the bottom of the engine. So that is most typical for opposed engines. So most typical for opposed engines. It has an oil sump on the bottom of the engine, has an oil sump on the bottom of the engine. Briefly, we'll say the oil pump sucks oil from the sump, delivers to the engine, and oil is drained back to the sump. Well, that's very succinct and quickly. So the oil pump sucks oil from the sump. Oil is delivered to the engine. And oil is drained back to the sump. An interesting thing about oil pumps aren't real particular about what they pump. They will pump whatever's, I guess, easiest, if you will. What do you want it to pump?
Oil.
All right, but if you leave an air leak somewhere, it's just as happy pumping oil or air. In fact, it's a little easier on it until it burns up. So that means that if, when you attach the oil pickup tube to your engine, so we only have like 1 or 2 oil pickup tubes available. So that's why you don't have one. You're going to be installing it when you go out and put it on the test stand. You're going to put an oil pickup tube on, and then you're going to put the sump on the bottom. And if you put the oil pickup tube on, but you don't put it on right, and you don't put a gasket there, you don't tighten it correctly, do one of many different weirdness things that I've seen, then you will have an air gap, and the pump will just pump air. And you will spend days and days and days troubleshooting, and you will get frustrated and want to do terrible things with a baseball bat to the engine. That'd be your fault. Also, if you leave out there's a plug or two, it'll do the same thing. So you want to make sure that you don't have air going through. That's one of the problems with that 2-piece pump that you have. It's one more place for air. So nowadays it's just one piece, so you only have between the accessory case and the pump housing is the only spot where you get an air leak. But with yours, you have that middle piece, which has that middle piece to the accessory case and the middle piece to the cover. All of that can leak air. That is all bad. All right, then we have a thing called the dry sump. Not really the appropriate word for it because it's certainly not dry. It's very oily and wet. But the oil is only there for a brief period of time. So dry sumps, we have I think all radials, I don't know of any radial that doesn't have one. Inverted engines. What's at the bottom of an inverted engine? The heads, yeah. So the cylinders. Inverted engines, some opposed engines. Some opposed. Such as the V-tail Bonanza. The V-tail Bonanza. Our V-tail Bonanza. Okay, so radials, they can't put a sump on the bottom because what's on the bottom of those engines? Cylinder. And an inverted can't have an oil sump there because what's on the bottom of them? So I guess you could if you had one big long one and it would go, I don't know. Be very difficult. So, all right, so radial engines, they have a very small sump right in between the 2 lower cylinders that just takes the oil, goes from there, and then it's sucked from there and goes back to a very big tank that's mounted on the firewall. Inverted engines do the same thing, and like our V-tail Bonanza, it does the same thing. It's got a regular looking oil pan, but it's very small, so oil goes into that. Then there's a thing called a scavenge pump. The scavenge pump is always bigger than the main pump. Why do you suppose that is?
Gotta pump it back to the main tank.
Well, but you have the engine pump pumped it in,
You always want oil in the tank.
so why would you need a bigger pump to
What do you
pump
mean
out
by
with the small
bigger?
pump put in?
What do you mean by bigger?
So your,
Oil?
yeah, so your oil pickup for the oil pump never runs out.
What do you mean by bigger?
Well, I like that
size?
theory. I do like that theory. We can probably not why they did it. Physically, the scavenge pump is physically bigger.
More oil.
Like when you build up a Continental that has a scavenge pump, it's almost twice the size. So they're the same diameter, but the scavenge pump is about that long versus the oil pump, which is like that long. So they're much longer gears, so you can pump twice as much. When the air goes through the engine and it's splashed and sprayed, it picks up oil. Oil picks up oil. Picks up air, and the oil becomes aerated, foamy. You still got to push out. Now you got to push air and oil, so you need a bigger pump to get rid of it. And then it goes in the tank, and then it kind of de-aerates and settles down because you suck it from the bottom. And so now the smaller pump can handle the pumping of the air, the oil without the air. Goes in the engine, picks up more air and stuff, and then the scavenge pump pumps it back out. No. Okay. So why the V-tail Bonanza? Why in the heck did they go? With
Front gear.
landing gear. Landing gear comes right up to the bottom of the oil sump, and they didn't have enough room for it up there, I believe. So sometimes it's just a clearance issue.
That was
So-
a whole 470, wasn't it, on some of those Bonanzas?
No, not the original V-tails. They were all the E series. That was, and they were developed for Continental. Continental developed them for Bonanza. That was the first 6-cylinder. But yes, I do believe they've modified them, and you can get an STC and put the big ones, and they don't have the sump thing. I don't know. But if you think about it, and you look at what a sump looked like from 0300, which is that era, they're probably thinking long. So I don't know. Because yeah, like the sump on your plane's only like that, right? It's maybe a little bit. It's not much because it's so wide and so long. I mean, yeah. So like the Lycoming sump for you guys, it's like that deep, but it's only about that square. Like for his engine, it is the length of the engine, the width of the engine, and about that deep. So they really brought it up close. Dry sump. All right. And V-tail Bonanza. That one was because of nose wheel clearance. All right. How about this? Operation of a dry sump engine. And we got to go through the operation of the dry sump engine because FAA asks a lot of oil questions about how a dry sump works versus a wet sump. Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay, here we go.
going back to the scavenge pump.
Scavenge pump.
That's the pump that, so with the dry sump or like the really small, shallow sump.
Mm-hmm.
that
Dry sump is the word.
Okay, so the scavenge sump would pull out the oil from that? Or
Yes.
put it into the tank?
Yes.
Okay. Alright. There we go.
And it's bigger because it sucks the ear.
There, how about a picture?
Yeah.
Oh,
Can't erase that. All right. So oil schematic system right here. All right. This is in the Bonanza oil system. Oil is fed to the engine oil pump from supply tank. So this supply tank, I don't like this picture because the supply tank should be maybe mounted over here because it's actually,
Gravity.
yeah, it's more in line. It's probably above the crankshaft, but hey, this is the way they did it. So it's what I got. So, all right, so you have the pressure pump. So the pressure pump sucks it out. Check valve, screen, oil bulb. You got to have a check valve because when the engine's not running, you don't want the oil to run out of here, fill this up, and you don't actually. This is kind of weird. You don't want the oil tank to run back into the engine, really, which is what happens to our Bonanza. Is you go check the oil in the tank, and it looks like you need a lot of oil. So the first time we ran it, we hadn't run it in years, and I was like one of the first ones to run it. So we checked the oil in the tank, and it was like almost empty. So we filled it up to the right amount, started it up, and it came shooting out everywhere because the crankcase was completely full of it. So once we started the scavenge pump, it pumped it out into here. So you can see how it's kind of backwards. So I really think that the check valve is more over here than it is here, but it's the way they drew it.
That you have that check valve. Well, like in this instance, it doesn't really make makes sense because the tank's below it. But
I know.
Since the tank's above it, that's why you have the check valve.
Yes.
Okay.
So I guess in this case, even though I believe this is the one I got this from a Bonanza, but in this case it would make sense because you don't want the, well, it's going to go drain here and back in. It doesn't make sense.
You
I'm
don't
sorry.
want gravity.
It's all going to drain back to the tank in this picture, and that's where you want it. You don't want the tank up here draining down into the case. But anyway, we'll go with this. So what's happening is the pressure pump sucks it up here. Very first thing is an oil pressure gauge. It's going to pressure feed to the bearings, everything, following the case, and the scavenge pump sucks it out of here and pumps it in the tank. Although in this picture, it's like, why have a scavenge pump? It's going to gravity drain in there anyway across the cooler. But let's see what I wrote here, because I wrote this. In the Bonanza oil system, oil is fed to the engine oil pump from a supply tank mounted just above and behind the engine. The return oil is picked up by a scavenge pump and returned to the supply tank, passing through a cooler, which is an integral part of the tank. Oil tank capacity is that doesn't make sense. No, it's not. It's not a ratio.
It'd be 2.5.
2.5.
maybe.
Yeah, that's what it was. 2.5 gallons. Oil filler neck is accessible. Yeah, it's not important. Both oil pumps. Yeah, that's not important. Anyway, so that's how that kind of works. So what we're going to do is we want to get into how this all works. However, before we get into that, let's